not being able to be in person is we can't see each other and be with each other. So if you have the ability to turn on a camera, please do so. And I'm going to go ahead and share. Uh-oh, I hear laughter.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's Giovanni causing trouble again?
I pushed the wrong button.
Okay, so I need to figure out how to share my screen, which I'm not doing a very good job with right now. Where is that button? Speaker view. Help me, Christy. I cannot find the share my screen.
You just hit Alt and S.
Thank you, Maggie. Alt S. Is it working?
No.
Not yet.
So there's a little green button at the bottom that says share screen. It's green, right in the middle of the screen.
Ah, there it is. I had to go into full size. Thank you. Host disabled participant screen sharing. So Christy, you need to do something. Did she hear me?
I don't know. She's mute.
Christy? Uh-oh.
Christy, unmute yourself.
Sorry, I couldn't do both buttons at the same time, but it should work now.
Okay. Yes, it does. It does. Okay. So
There we go. It's starting to come through.
Now go into full screen. Yay. Come on. All right. Okay. Story of my life lately, technical difficulties. So first of all, thank you everyone for participating, for spending some time with us today as we share with you what we have found over the past few weeks on options and scenarios, readiness, ability for a psychiatry residency program in Butte-Glenn County. We've got a lot of slides, in part because we need to set the stage educationally about some key terms, but we're going to hit objectives of the study, the background, which is a lot of the educational piece, the approach we took, our findings, and then get into discussions and next steps. And truly, discussion is of all of this. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. It doesn't bug me one bit, and I'd rather we get your question out there or your comment out there than lose it by holding it to the end. Okay. So our objectives were to figure out, is an ACGME accredited psychiatry residency program feasible in Butte-Glenn counties? What's the optimal structure? Is a partner required, and what will it cost? Okay. For background, we're going to talk about what I refer to as GME 101, some of the requirements for psychiatry residency program, and how residency programs are paid for, because it's the intersection of the requirements and the payment that determines if it's feasible. Okay, you can meet all the requirements and not get payment, in which case you're never going to get this thing started. Likewise, you could have all the ability in the world to get paid, but not meet the requirements, in which case also you won't have a program. Okay, so it's that intersection. Okay, as far as this is, I'm going to try and fix this. Whoopsie, sorry. GME 101. All residency programs must be sponsored by ACGME. It used to be there were two sponsoring entities, the AOA on the osteopathic side and ACGME on the allopathic side. A number of years ago, they made a plan to merge that accreditation into effect in this past year. Okay, so there are no more AOA programs per se. Everything is accredited through ACGME. You must have a sponsoring institution, and that is the entity that holds full responsibility for the academic and financial integrity of the residency program. Okay, now that sounds light, but it's a lot of work and it's a lot of responsibility. Okay? Then that process for being a sponsoring institution is a separate accreditation process from the process of getting a specialty. So you first have to get sponsoring institution accreditation, and then you can go for specialty accreditation. Or if you partner with an entity that already has sponsoring institution accreditation, you can jump immediately into specialty. So I'm going to ask that everybody mute because I am hearing it sounds like Darth Vader in my earpiece. So if everybody can mute, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, I'm not going to go line by line through psychiatry residency requirements. I am going to say that we went through these requirements in order to both look at where the gaps are within your region, as well as look at how a rotation schedule may exist, because that drives the reimbursement from a revenue perspective. Okay, what you'll see is that, you know, obviously there's a fair amount of psychiatry training that needs to occur. There's neurology that needs to occur. There's always a 1-year outpatient experience that occurs. Okay. You have to have child and adolescent. You have to have care of the elderly, and all of these go deeper down. I mean, even what I'm showing you, the pages, what I'm showing you, have deeper requirements than just this. So forensic, emergency, community psych, consultative liaison, all of this has to be in there. ChemDep and substance abuse. You have to have didactics, you have to have scholarly activity, which is, you know, ACGME's way of saying research. We're not talking lab research. It can be community-based, it can be quality, but there has to be a robust scholarly activity. And then there's also some physical plant requirements as well. So things like residents having a workspace, residents having video and playback technology. So the requirements are very robust. Okay. We also have personnel requirements. And again, these are not abnormal in any way. Every specialty has its personnel requirements, and every specialty varies a little bit in it, but there's also very strong similarities. So for example, you can't just have a program director who has no experience. They have to have had experience. Everybody, every physician, regardless of what they're doing, if they are interacting with a resident, must be board certified. You have to have a coordinator. So it's things like this that are part of the requirements and built into the financial modeling as well. Okay. These requirements can and will change. I cannot guarantee you that by the time you start your program, these requirements will be in place. They very well could shift. Okay. So as an example, there is discussion going on about how many psychiatry faculty you need to have and how many hours they need to commit to. Okay, so that's an example of something that might well change over the next few years. When we pay for residency programs, these are the main buckets, and I'm going to walk through each of these buckets quickly. The takeaway here is each one of them have different requirements for qualifying, different funding formulas, and different compliance requirements. Okay? So when you're looking at any model of a residency program and you start looking at funding, you have to look at how do we want to structure this so it can maximize its funding opportunities. Okay. All right. So Medicare is the one that is most traditional. We started with Medicare GME back in early 60s. Okay. Back when Medicare was started, so was Direct GME. Direct GME pays for the resident's salary and benefits, as well as the faculty salary and benefits and overhead costs. But key to that is it pays Medicare's fair share. What does that mean? It means you look at the hospital's Medicare percentage and apply that to any formula. And Medicare's expectation is other payers will pay that balance. And that doesn't necessarily mean other insurance companies. It just means other entities will pay that balance. There is a term called a PRA, that's per resident amount. And the direct reimbursement is a function of the per resident amount times your Medicare percentage. Now the per resident amount, and this is why this is really important, it's equal to the lower of the hospital's actual cost or the average of hospitals located in the same core-based statistical area. So why is this so important? It is so important because if any resident, intern or resident or fellow walks into your hospital, pick a hospital, doesn't matter which one, and receives education and you do not pay the costs and you do not pay costs that are higher than the average in the region, Medicare will set your per resident amount at 0. And it will forever be 0 until such time as the funding formulas ever change. So this, particularly in your region, particularly when you have the amount of Medicare you have in your region, is really important. And we'll hit on this again. All right. Now, it does vary. You have critical access hospitals in your region. It does vary by that. Also, if you were to have sole community hospitals, it varies by that. But for general acute, this is key. Indirect was created in the 80s as a way to address what was believed as the extra utilization of residents in the hospital, extra labs, extra, radiology tests, extra whatever, inefficiencies. But what we know about indirect is that for, yes, certain specialties, that makes sense. But for more outpatient specialties, it does not. Okay. So depending on the situation, we include those dollars in the calculation because either the hospital is going to get it and the hospital is going to pay costs associated, or they'll pass it through to an entity. There are lots of different permutations of it, but it's a bigger number than the direct. Okay. And I've quickly listed there the factors that go into that. Number of interns and residents as a ratio to the number of beds is a key factor in that, okay? As is, of course, then, again, the Medicare percentage. Hospitals also get capital indirect, which is a function of that indirect payment times Medicare's existing payment for capital. Now, you'll notice I keep saying hospital, hospital, hospital. It's because that's who gets paid for this. FQHCs can get paid direct, but again, it's Medicare's percentage, Medicare's share. And most FQHCs don't have a significant Medicare percentage, so it's usually not worth bothering with because if the FQHC is getting it, then the hospital is not. Opportunities and pitfalls with this type of funding, with CMS funding. You may have heard terms like GME naive hospital or capped in the GME cap. In 1997, the Balanced Budget Act, we were sitting in a world where the Council on Graduate Medical Education said, we have too many doctors, we're going to cap the number of residents that Medicare pays for. And they took what was ever on your 1996 cost report and said, that's it, that's all you'll ever get paid for. Now, if you had no residents back in 1996 and when it was capped, then you're considered GME naive. You can then get paid for residents if you start a new program, and that triggers your cap. When you trigger your cap, you are sitting with a 5-year clock, at which point your cap is set. You are sitting with hospitals that are GME naive. You are very fortunate that you have hospitals that are GME naive. And again, there are different rules with the critical access hospitals. And as we'll get to in a little bit, with the PUF that exists with Butte-Glenn Behavioral Health. Okay. Another very popular source of funding since 2010 has been teaching health center funding. That started as a demonstration project through HRSA, funded by HRSA. It was created with the Affordable Care Act. It's been continued and continued. It pays $150,000 per year per resident, but it's not always that number. If times are tight, the funding can go down and has gone down as low as $96,000. But it has been continuously renewed. Key to this qualification to this is qualifying either by being an ambulatory clinic that serves the underserved or a GME consortium where the ambulatory clinic plays a substantial role. Academic health centers, hospitals, that's pretty much it, are not eligible. Okay. We've gone through a period where there weren't any funded from about 2014 on, maybe 2013 on. We did have 5 funded this past year. Okay. Now, what I look at when considering whether to go after teaching health center funding or not, one of the factors is what is the GME reimbursement we are looking at with the hospitals. And in your case, the GME reimbursement is substantial enough that it is not worth looking at the teaching health center funding, provided you keep as many rotations as possible credited to the hospitals. So let me keep going. We are fortunate in the state to have a number of different funding opportunities. Unfortunately, psychiatry has not been, except for a couple, strategic focus. But with training programs that are in FQHCs, RHCs, Indian Health Service, anything licensed by the state as an ambulatory clinic, they have the ability to have by having the teaching program, have a rate triggering event. What that means is if they choose to, they can go in and renegotiate their rate with the state at a higher level. That can be extremely advantageous. It is a case-by-case basis. Okay. In our state, we do not have Medicaid funding. Every state is different, but in California, we do not fund GME through Medi-Cal. Instead, we put funding through some state grant programs that are honestly very sizable. So let me hit that in next. One thing that we have in the state is Mental Health Services Act innovation grants that flow through the county behavioral health, okay, the different counties and their behavioral health departments. We have the OSHPOD Workforce Education and Training Grants. That is for psychiatry. It's referred to as the WET program. We have Song Brown, but psychiatry is not eligible. That is a very sizable grant should you ever decide to do family medicine, internal medicine, some of the more what they consider, you know, bread and butter primary care. And we also have Cal MedForce, of which psychiatry is not eligible, also very sizable. Okay. Foundations and health plans, we rarely see them provide operational funding. Usually it's some sort of a startup funding. And usually their funding is to tip you over the edge, to get you that last mile, okay? Foundations like to partner with other foundations so that no one entity is holding the entire bag. And we have to thank North Valley, or I have to thank North Valley Community Health Foundation for their generosity in supporting this feasibility study. It's an example of getting you the last mile, of getting you over the edge. Health plans also have demonstrated a willingness to fund feasibility studies and planning initiatives. And I even have one, it was a Medicaid health plan that funded operations, which is, as I mentioned, extremely rare. All right, so all of that is a lot of background to try and level set folks a little bit into how this then impacts the feasibility study. Okay, let me pause for a second. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. So our methodology, we did 21 key informant interviews. We did not get as many done as we wanted. There are people we still want to talk to. So if we did not get to you, it's not because we didn't want to. And 21 is a tremendous amount. But we you know, there's still more input we want to get. We, of course, did literature reviews, the ACGME requirements, we developed block rotation schedules, calculated GME reimbursement, and did high-level financial modeling. Findings. You have much of what you need to do a psychiatry residency program. Almost never do I walk into a community and see that they have everything. Almost never, okay? What you do is you say, okay, this is what you have. This is where your gaps are. Where are we going to go to fill those gaps? And you look to other institutions or other communities to fill those gaps. So you don't have any inpatient child and adolescent psych. Where can we go get that? But you never say, oh, you can't do a program because you don't have inpatient child and adolescents, okay? And that's a common mistake people make. They think if they don't have all the requirements, they can't do it, okay? But even though you have so much of this, your organizations are incredibly siloed. There's an absence of trust. There's an absence of collaboration. There's an absence of communication. And so bringing all the resources together, which is what you would need to do, because not one entity has everything either. You have to bring everybody together. That is your major hurdle to overcome, is to get everybody bringing their resources to the table so collectively you can address this access issue through residency training. Okay. Now, before anybody says, oh, well, how is that possible and how can that be done and it can't be done, I'm here to tell you it can, because I've had groups do it. Okay. Huge opportunity for collaboration. As I mentioned, you've got GME naive hospitals. That's a huge opportunity. You've got one of the things that's really cool in this situation is that Butte County Behavioral Health's PUF is not provider-based. And as such, it can be on any of the other hospitals' cost report for the time of training, okay? This is really cool because if we had to claim the PUF's time of training on a Medicare cost report and get paid Medicare's fair share, it would be near zero because very little Medicare is sitting at that PUF. But if we can claim it at, say, Enloe, now we're talking significant dollars for the same rotation. Okay. This takes us from being financially highly questionable to financially very viable. And as I mentioned, Butte County, oops, I have one mental health and one behavioral health. No, sorry, that's a total typo. I have Butte County Medical Society. It's Butte County Behavioral Health has access to innovation funds, provided that the proposal is truly innovative and supported by the community. Okay. We have a lot of findings here, so I'm going to keep going with some high-level ones. I don't know how many folks are aware, but back in April, the state started allowing for an additional $29 per ACE screening for FQHCs, RHCs, and Indian Health Service clinics. Also for other clinics, but for the purpose of this conversation, it's relevant for those groups. Everybody wants to partner with you guys. I had no academic institution say, no, we don't want to partner with you. Everybody wants to. But there are varying levels of speed, different ideas, different, coming at it in different ways. Okay. Budgets are universally tight, especially due to COVID. We don't have enough resources for children and adults who are experiencing and have experienced trauma. Historically, the institutions have thought residency programs were too expensive When I show you numbers, you'll go, oh, well, maybe that wasn't accurate. Okay. And then some individuals and some organizations express frustration at certain academic institutions. And I'd like to erase that, honestly. I don't think that there has to be, for this to work, a reset. So people have to hit the reset button, both with the organizations and individuals inside your region and outside the region. Okay. Some want to move really quickly, some want to move really slowly. Okay, so there's balancing that needs to be done there and agreement that has to be reached to do that balancing. Has to be integrity and transparency. That happens to be my opinion, but it was also said in the interviews. Okay, so your folks are feeling it too. The cap can't be rushed. If you have 5 years to set your GME cap, it has to be done strategically and thoughtfully. How many residency programs are we going to start in this region? Because once you hit that 5-year mark, that's the most you're going to get paid, unless funding formulas change. Okay, and I'll say it one more time, historic challenges of partnering and collaborating. You've got some incredible inpatient educational opportunities. You've got a voluntary inpatient unit. You've got a PUF with seeing the Medicaid and the uninsured populations. You really have some great inpatient opportunities. You just don't have inpatient child and adolescent. You don't have Geri Psych. Not that inpatient Geri Psych is a requirement, but it sure is cool if you have it. You have strong pediatric psychiatrists on the call. I mentioned all of those. Some quotes here, and that not every psych facility is capable of handling medical needs, and the medical facilities are not capable of handling psych needs. We have to find the bridge, okay? Because we're not saying everybody has to be everything to everybody, but how do we collaborate to bridge it so you have continuity? And then a perspective that there is a missing piece for the people in the middle, that you've got resources for insured, resources for destitute, but the middle people, there's a gap there. Okay. Let's see, I mentioned about the academic institutions. We also spoke with Kaiser. They too have a willingness to allow trainees. I've hit the trust. If you pool your collective resources, you do have a lot of psychiatrists in the region. Not an abundance, not like if you were to sit in San Francisco, but we're not saying that. Do you have enough to consider starting a program? Consider planning a program? Yes, because one thing I know, if it's done right, if you build it, they will come. Okay, I've seen that too many times, but it has to be done right. Okay, and lots of interesting collaboration throughout the North State. Okay. One thing that was requested is that we look at economic impact. Now, we did not point to a full economic impact study, but I did share a couple of top line pieces. The AMA did a physician economic impact study back in 2018. And here are just a couple highlights. Now, this is all of California. It doesn't break it down by counties or by regions. So, you know, we can adjust a little bit, take this as, you know, with the sense of generality that it is. But let's just say that 13 jobs are created by each physician. And let's just say you retain 2 graduating residents each year. And it keeps going and going. I mean, clearly there is significant economic impact in jobs and in tax dollars and in revenues and in dollars spent in the community. All right, let's jump to university participation. University participation can take many forms. And it is not a black and white model. There is a lot of shades of gray. It can go everything from an affiliation where you just use their name to them sponsoring the entire program. And in sponsoring it, it is their program, okay? I've seen everything you can imagine in between, where the university signs the diploma even though they don't employ the residents, where the university provides faculty development, where, you know, where certain rotations happen or med students happen from the university. It's something you create with the university once you decide what kind of model you want to have. The value proposition of an academic relationship is first and foremost academic legitimacy. I can't prove it. There are people who, if they heard me say it, would deny, well, ACGME would deny profusely if they heard me say it, but there is a different litmus test for community organizations who start a residency program versus academic institution who already has 200 programs and is adding number 201, okay? I've seen the site visits go very differently, okay, from ACGME. So that legitimacy with the accrediting body is important. And I'll pull that in a little later. It's also important with recruiting residents. A lot of residents like to think that it means something extra to have that academic name on their diploma, so they can put it on their CV. I think they're probably right, okay? Faculty, there are plenty of faculty who will say, the only way I'll come is if I have a faculty appointment. So you can't ignore the legitimacy that comes with an academic relationship. You also have the ability, whether they provide it free or whether it is something you pay for things like faculty development, scholarly activity, and other traditional academic library services, okay, other traditional academic resources. And their support for innovation, okay? There are research projects they are doing. There are new curriculums they're trying to design. So there's support for innovation. I'm not saying financial support. I'm saying we're doing this, so let's have you participate with us. Okay. And I'm going to hit a little bit on trauma-informed care. So many of you guys know all about trauma-informed care, but I want to highlight a couple things. I was shocked as I went through the literature and found that trauma-informed care is not deeply embedded in psychiatry residency programs. Shocked. In fact, one of the articles I read went to great length talking about how problematic that was. Okay? When you see it, it's mostly didactic. It's not experiential, and it's not woven throughout the curriculum. I see that as an opportunity for your region to develop a cutting-edge curriculum that is a model for others. I mean, who better? All right. So some of the opportunities and some of the challenges, high level. Trauma-informed care, ACEs, CMS reimbursement, innovation funding, and the acceptance of telehealth in your region already. Some of the challenges are leadership capacity, silos, the GME know-how, and the budget reductions that are going on. Again, very high level. So I'm going to talk about models for consideration. One that's been talked about and considered before was a program where the first 2 years would be at an academic institution and the second 2 years in Butte-Glenn, with it not being a new program. Now, go back to what I shared with you before of how Medicare funding to a hospital for residency training can only be triggered if it's GME naive, you have that, and it's a new program. So in model number one, it is not a new program. It is solely academic institution adding 2 more residents and having that be a rural track. Okay. Model number 2 is a new program where the first 2 years are at the academic institution, Butte-Glenn, and in that the university is the sponsor. Model number 3 is all of the years at Butte, certain rotations going out, and Butte or Butte-Glenn entity being a sponsor. Then there's what I call the Go Big program, which I have the university as a sponsor because of that academic legitimacy. Because if you're going to do something really innovative, you're going to need that legitimacy. And in that model, it's also a trauma-informed care model, but it heavily relies on telehealth so that you can have rotations in the best possible environments you could imagine. Okay, so imagine, you know, your residents are sitting in Butte or Glenn counties, but they are having a rotation at a prison in Colorado via telehealth, as an example, and they're getting the foremost expert in a certain modality coming into them via telehealth. And then finally is the North State program, which would be having Butte-Glenn as a hub and different locations as spokes throughout the North State. I'm taking away number 1 and number 5, okay? 1 and 5. Whoops, I guess I guess I goofed up my animations. I took away number 1 and number 5. Why? Number 1 said no new program. If you do number 1, you are not only messing up the per resident amount at your hospitals, but you're not getting any revenue for 2 years. Okay, that's actually not for 2 years, for 4 years, because you're not triggering it with a new program. Okay. Number 5, although I love it and I love the idea of a hub and spoke with hitting all of the rural, a number of other sites in the North State, that falls into the category of walk before you run. Okay, there's time to expand, but let's first get you solid. So this goes into the description of what I mentioned verbally, so that you have it in print. As to those 3 models that remain and what they would look like. One thing I didn't mention is on the Go Big program, it is completely contingent on continued waivers by both Medicare and ACGME. We are currently, because of COVID, we have had some waivers by ACGME and CMS for allowable precepting and reimbursement of teleprecepting. Okay. High level of consideration for each model. Assuming that academic integrity is equal for each model, and that is an important critical assumption. The considerations come down to finance, control, partnerships, and alacrity. Okay, speed of getting there, and whether that meets your expectation. Fast is not necessarily good, but slow is not necessarily good either, right? The question is, what's your expectation as far as speed? So the new 2-2 program, the responsibility for the program is with the university, but the first 2 years will solely be the expense for the region. There's no offsetting revenue because you guys don't count as rural, all right? If the university were willing, any university, they can start rural tracks, but only in areas that count as rural, and Chico doesn't. Okay. So you're taking on a program that you'll only have expenses for in the first 2 years. And that's painful. Okay. The next one is the 4-year program in Butte. You need to send rotations out. You would need to do your own sponsoring institution application and create your own sponsoring institution, but you will have control in the region for that program. With that control comes responsibility, okay? And I can't emphasize that enough. It's a lot of responsibility. And then the Go Big model, I mentioned already the continued waivers of ACGME and CMS, but it would demonstrate the region as thought leaders, and that excites me. And that, as I mentioned, the university would need to be the sponsor for that legitimacy. So I tried to put it in a matrix. These are my opinions, only my opinions. The zeros mean neutral, the dashes mean negative, and plus obviously need plus. And I tried to put things in green and red, but when you look at this, the one that has the most green is all 4 years in Butte-Glenn. Now, these things could shift. I mean, if some of these were to turn green, whoopsie, let's go back. If some of these would turn green, then they could be equally as good of models. And again, remember, it assumes all things are equal from a standpoint of academic integrity. All right, this one, short of a university saying, hey, we know we're not going to get paid for it, but we're going to pay those costs ourselves, which is highly improbable, financially does not pencil. And we'll show you that in a minute. Okay. Another thing to consider is the timeline. Now I've got lots of dates in here, but the key takeaway is another entity as a sponsoring institution could get you approved in April 2022. Okay. Depends on how fast the university is willing to move. If you were to create your own sponsoring institution and put in your own application, could get you approved February 2022. The key takeaway is either model, again, depending on speed, won't have you having residents until July 1, 2023. Both models are equal. Okay. You'll note, whether approved in February or April, you could say, hey, we're going to not go in the match the first year and just take people outside the match. I would not recommend that. I would recommend you go for the full recruitment and interviewing process, regardless of which model you were to go with. Okay. Okay. Let's say you were to have a entity within the county be the sponsoring institution or counties. You're going to have to pick one entity or create a GME consortium. That GME consortium either needs to be a new or existing nonprofit. It could be Healthy Rural California, but it would have to be a collective decision. And I'll share with you that although it is not, having a non-university or non-medical center entity be the sponsoring institution for psychiatry programs, it's not the norm, it's not unheard of either. Okay. Same with the GME Consortium, not unheard of, but definitely not the predominant model. Okay. If you were to go with a hospital, an FQHC, or any other entity, you have to work out flow of funds between those entities, and I hate to say it, it boils down to control. Okay. Benefits of a consortium, it gets everyone out of their silos because they are focused on achieving one common vision. Okay. It incorporates the unique strengths of each organization. Everybody doesn't have the whole thing, but they each bring a piece and the sum is greater than the parts. And then that can be the go-to place for all medical education in the region. The challenge is, unless every participant can commit to leaving all their issues at the door when they come to a consortium meeting and focus solely on collaboration for medical education, when in the meeting, don't bother. Now, I am not being Pollyanna on this. I have done it too many times. I've had it succeed in places where they thought it never would succeed. Okay? It can happen. The other challenge of a GME consortium is it's an empty shell. And ACGME is not accrediting an empty shell. So you have to decide what functions are you buying and what functions are you leasing. Everything from payroll and accounting to risk management. Are you contracting for the Office of GME Services with an entity that already has it? All of those decisions have to be made so that you can put in an application that addresses how you're achieving all of that. By making those lease buy decisions, it also allows you to build partnerships with the various entities in the consortium. So I have a consortium that Maggie and I are working on where a very large hospital entity, very large hospital entity, is sitting there going, well, why would we participate in consortium? We have an office of GME, we have all of this. Well, they finally saw the reason that they needed to participate in the consortium, and it had to do with politics in that area. But then the bone to throw them is you be the office of GME. And that gave them the piece of control that they needed to be a yes. So let's do financials. These are high level. By high level, I mean we have made assumptions about curriculum, which drives the revenue. We have made assumptions about expenses, but things could shift if you get a program director in who says, oh, I don't want that curriculum that way, or they say we need more of this or more of that. Okay, so it's high level. We also have not included any clinic revenue or expense, and that is another cut in looking at all of this. All right, now this number, the startup number, is net of any, it does not have any grant revenue in it. This is pure expense. Okay, again, an estimate, a good estimate, an informed estimate, but it's not, you know, the final. It could come in, I would argue, less than this. Right? But this is roughly the amount of startup funding we believe you would need in order to create a consortium and be the sponsoring institution. Okay, this number will also change dramatically if you were to be with an academic institution sponsoring it. This is really where you do the double take. Okay, so when we're looking at the model where university is unable to get revenue for the first 2 years of the residency, and you as a community pay the expenses, these are the losses you're looking at. It gets better over time, but these first 3 years are bad. They're rough. Where it gets interesting is when you have the 4 years, primarily in Butte-Glenn, incorporating rotations going out where you won't get any revenue for it. Your first year's a little rough, but look what it gets to. And that is a function of an incredibly favorable GME reimbursement from Medicare. Now, I will be the first to say, you never make a decision about a residency program based on profit. In my world, I believe, and I'll argue, there is no profit in medical education. If you have an extra dollar, it gets invested back. In your community, investment back easily could tie to improved facilities for residency training, improved programs for residency training, right? But it ties to residency training. Okay, important. I've said this already like 3 times, but this is the slide, so nobody can ever say she didn't tell us. Okay, do not mess up your per resident amount. Do not mess up your GME cap. It's too valuable. You have an extraordinarily high GME reimbursement, one that I normally don't see. Okay, so don't mess it up. Do not take residence. before you're either paying for them or ready to trigger your cap with a new program. So we've based all of this on a 4444 psych program. We are suggesting you do a GME consortium. With a GME consortium, I absolutely would have an academic partner or two in it. Okay, there's no limits to how many you could have in a consortium, because it's needed to have those eyes of people who do this for a living. Okay, and I would have the didactic and experiential curriculum in trauma-informed care throughout all 4 years of training. I would like for you guys to do the go big model. I don't see that off the table right now. We just don't know what's going to happen with Medicare yet and with ACGME yet. So I might run those parallel for a while as we sift through what's happening with ACGME and Medicare, because those policy changes were created due to COVID. A lot of people really love teleprecepting. I think it could stay, but I can't sit here and guarantee that for you. Okay. On outpatient services, I would look at either having or you could do both of these. Okay, 3rd year outpatient. I would have either the FQHC or IHS lease outpatient space under Butte County Behavioral Health, put it under their scope, get what we call a fair reimbursement or a fair rate. Some people call it the enhanced rate. Some people have other phrases for it, but bottom line is they're paid on a cost basis. And pick up that extra $29 per ACES screen. You could also do the same with Oroville's Rural Health Clinic and have your pediatric and adolescent outpatient consultations going on there. You've got to be really careful though as to Oroville's cost report, because being that right now Oroville does not have inpatient psych, you want to make sure you keep them as pristine as possible for if and when they trigger their GME cost report, or their cost report for GME. So discussion is, let me give you my answers real quick and let's then have a discussion. Is this feasible? Absolutely. Absolutely. Which model will you choose? Well, I gave you my choice. All right. And it's not my choice. The reason, a variety of factors, including what I've heard from you guys. But it's definitely a difficult choice. It's definitely a difficult road. I can't emphasize that enough. It's going to be much easier in many ways to turn to an academic institution as a partner and say, you guys sponsor it, okay? So ultimately, this is a decision you guys have to get to. How to cover the planning costs? You know, do we have the full 1.8 million covered? I don't think so. But WET funding, innovation grant funding, you are well on your way. What entities should sponsor? If you keep it in the county or the 2 counties, I would recommend a GME consortium because it's turf neutral. What does a successful residency look like? And that's something I think you guys need to discuss. But first and foremost, it is an entity, it is a residency where your residents, 100% of your residents sit for their boards, 100% of their residents pass their boards, and no less than 50%, but preferably 70, stay in your region to practice. Now, add to that, what is the popular opinion about your residency, how far down on your rank list you go to rank residents, when you match residents. All of those are other factors to look at. But what's really important, are you producing quality residents as demonstrated in their board pass rates, and are you keeping them? Okay. And then, are you ready to go? You're ready to do this. Okay. So, got to decide on a model, decide on a sponsor, and decide to act. And then last is a quote that was in your own Strengthening the Safety Net in Butte County document. Now is the time to build from strength and collaboration to create a lasting safety net that ensures all of its members, particularly the most vulnerable ones, are taken care of and able to contribute to a thriving future. You guys can do this, and it would be thrilling. Many of you know I'm a native Californian. Some of you know that my family used to vacation up in Paradise. Be thrilling to see you guys do this. So with that, I'm going to pause, show you. Oh, we don't have a picture of Chris on there, huh? It's our finance team who did their work, and then of course Maggie and I, who most of you have met. So let me stop there, and let's open it up for discussion.
Kiki, one of the things that I've found kind of puzzling or troubling about this is it seems like the cap is for all residency slots. And so it seems like then you have to have your general surgery and your internal medicine and anybody else, whoever might want to have a residency program, be on board at the same time. And then it starts to become really overwhelming. This is overwhelming enough, but can you respond to how that might work?
Yeah. So without going too much in the weeds, in the 5th year, your fiscal intermediary for a hospital will look at the highest PGY year of each specialty, training at that facility. So let's say you had, let's take Enlo's example, and let's just say you had a total of 4 residents, but they don't ever count. So let's just say you get credit for 3 residents in PGY 4 year, okay? They're gonna take that number 3 and multiply it by the number of training years for psychiatry and say, okay, that's 12 slots. They're then next gonna look at your next program, and let's say it's internal medicine. And they'll go, oh, well, you've only had the internal medicine program for 1 year. It's a 5-5-5 program, and you had 4 allowable residents in that first year. So we're going to go 4 times 3 years of internal medicine training. That's 12. So now we're up to 24.
Okay.
Surgery. So you can stagger. That's the bottom line, is you can stagger. We finished a project about 8 months ago for a large California health system where we did exactly that. We planned out 4 programs to optimize their cap setting and said, start family this year, internal that year, ER the next, and surgery the last. And these are your cap setting PGY years. This is your total. Then your job is to make sure you do that. And unfortunately, that often is a problem. I mean, I'm dealing with a client right now who has chosen to do a global health rotation. And I just sit there and hold my head in my hands because Medicare doesn't pay for global rotations. It's not part of your cap setting. You're hurting yourself. Okay, so it is. That said, it's a commitment. You know, the client I mentioned who is we did that strategic planning for. Maggie and I we wrote and submit their family medicine application on May 5th. Next step is to be internal medicine. We need to have that written and submitted October. And they're looking at us, and again, it's a very large health system, and they're going, do we have to, can we have a break? And I'm like, no, you started the clock. You have started. So now it's all in. But it's very common after you get your first one in that you go, oh, we can't do anymore. We don't want to do anymore.
I have a question. When you calculate the number of residents, is that filled residency slots, or is it residency slots that you're capable of providing when they calculate that cap?
Oh, it is allowable. So let's take Enloe again, for example, and let's say, as an example, and let's say you've got 4 psych residents a year, and let's use global health rotation as an example. Let's say all 4 residents go on a global health rotation for one block. Okay, so now this is where my math mind is not going to work. You now have, for all 4, 12 out of 13 allowable rotations. So you have 3 point something FTEs. Okay, it's all based on allowable. Things that will make you nuts. Research is only an allowable rotation if it is done facing the hospital's patient population. If you're doing research solely on the Indian Health Service's patient population, as an example, or the RHC's patient population, that's not allowable. And that's that number, once you take away all the non-allowables, multiply by the number of years of training, that gets you the cap number. And then they add up the cap number for each specialty.
Okay, so just to confirm, my thought was with regard to unfilled residency slots. Sometimes programs don't fill, they'll have 4 residency slots, they'll fill 3 of them. But in this case, that would be 4 allowable residency slots, and that would be calculated towards the cap, not the 3 filled of the 4 residency slots.
No. It would be, if they only had 3 filled, it would be the 3 filled minus anything that isn't allowable times the years of training.
Okay, so if we were to have 4 slots and we were to not fill some of those slots, that also counts against us.
Correct.
Okay.
But they look at the highest number of FTEs in a PGY year.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you didn't fill a slot in PGY1, but in PGY3, you've got all 4 slots and only a little bit of unallowable. They're going to focus on PGY3. Okay. And I tell people the year of your cap setting, I want you to duct tape everybody into their chairs in the hospital. Nobody does it.
Are you through, Scott?
Kiki, I might have missed this when I was seeing a patient right now, but I remember you mentioning something like if you want to recruit residents, and let's say I think if you start on, technically you could start in April or July of 2022, but you're not able to make it to the match. You want all the patients and all the residents to the match. How come you wouldn't consider, like, if we're already approved, we can't accept people outside the match? And
you can.
Especially recruiting a program, because I know I graduated off the cycle technically. Most people graduate in June. I finished in December with just the way my school ran. And so if there's a way to, recruit residents, I wouldn't consider only going through the match, because a lot of times we can actually recruit residents, especially I'm a foreign grad, we're allowed to recruit residents outside the match, especially if we know who they are and know, their backgrounds and if they've done rotations. So, I wouldn't, solely just base it on the match alone, because, there's a lot of things we can, leave the other option. I'm wondering if that's something that can be done in case we get approved for a program early on.
So, okay, there's many factors here. If you partner with an academic institution and their sponsor, I'm willing to bet the academic institution will not be willing to go outside the match, but that would have to be the discussion with the academic institution. Second, yes, there are outstanding residents who we are able to get outside the match, and being in California, that just ups our probability of that. And I want you guys having the strongest first year class possible, because this is your first foray into the residency world. Okay, so yeah, you might get 2 really, really strong ones, and you might get 2 who aren't as strong. In which case, your medical staffs who are involved in teaching could well say, "What are we doing here?" So the strongest play is to be in the match. Now, as you mentioned, if you've taken medical students or done a sub-I and know these people, that would change my opinion. If you're with an academic institution, as I mentioned, that predicates a certain path too. Unfortunately, the Psychiatry Residency Review Committee only meets twice a year, February and April, I think it was. February and April, which is really strange. Usually they all meet one more time in the fall. So you really only have how do I explain this? If you were doing internal medicine or family, as example, they have a meeting in October. So if I get approved in October, I can still make interview season. But the way psych has it set up, you can't make interview season. You kind of have to. You're set up to go into a summer recruitment and a fall of interview. I probably didn't explain that well.
Also, just to add on, to piggyback on what you said about the sponsoring institution, NRMP has an all-in policy. So
Right.
if you are with a university as an institution, most likely they are all bound by the all-in policy to match every candidate through the match.
Right. Thank you. Yes.
Kiki, I'm not sure if Giovanni's still on the call, but he did ask a question earlier on about, does your report describe the historic challenges that have hindered collaboration?
No, it does not.
Okay.
If he wants us to, we can, yeah, I'd want to talk with him about that.
Kiki, can you give us some examples of consortium programs in psychiatry?
Ooh, in psychiatry, there is one in Oklahoma. The one in Joplin used to think of themselves more as a consortium, but they're not now. They're not anymore.
What?
Huh? Hold on, let me pull up. I have all the psych. I can't, somebody's saying something. Okay, that's not a question, huh? Oh, you know what? That list went down when I shut down my computer. So those are the first two that come to mind. My list was open, but I was having computer issues, so my list is no longer open.
Kiki, I'll pull those up.
Thank you.
I can get those later too. We don't have to take everyone's time for that. I'm just
Okay,
curious.
thanks. It's definitely not the norm. No two ways about it. But if you do a consortium model, you're doing it. I also would never recommend doing a consortium model. That's a lie. Let me rephrase this. It is not my preference to do a consortium model if you're only going to do one program.
Thank you.
Because that one program, to do that is expensive. It gets its return on investment if you start to do more than one program in the consortium. The value is that turf neutrality.
So this consortium would be the consortium that manages all of the residencies in basically the North State or Butte-Glenn counties. They would handle the surgery and the...
Yeah, I mean, it becomes interesting if you look, it could. Oh, another consortium, oh, well, no, that's started out as a consortium. Well, there is a consortium. There's one in Indiana, in Evansville, Indiana.
That's Maryland.
Even though I said this is the way I'd like you guys to go, or what I'm recommending you do, it's not without the need for a tremendous amount of additional conversation. So would it be the one to sponsor everything? It could be. There's a lot of value to that. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. I mean, there are times when there is an argument to put a certain program, like we start talking general surgery. I'll be honest, I like to see those sponsored by the universities because the research requirement for a general surgery program is so extensive, so robust. It's hard for community entities to fulfill that. Definitely difficult for a GME consortium to fulfill it. Again, unless you work some interesting relationships with a university.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Is there any university that has shown any interest at all in being a sponsoring agency or institution?
All of them have, it's in different time frames.
Specifically, UC Davis, have they shown an interest?
We have talked, Davis definitely has expressed interest. Cal North State and Stanford were the three institutions we spoke with. Kaiser would not be sponsoring. Kaiser's not an academic institution yet. I mean, kind of, sort of, but we're not going to go there. Kaiser is not interested in sponsoring, but would take rotations.
To speak a little bit about North State, that's a very interesting possibility. Now, right now, they're strictly a medical school.
Right.
Is that correct? Could you?
That is correct.
How would that work exactly?
I can't help me here. Is May still on the phone? Dr. Ha? Is Dr. Ha still on the phone? I thought you was. Okay. So how that would, the challenge with them is right now their focus is on a hospital, not, and the development of their GME strategy has not happened yet. So there is a level of cart before the horse going on, timing issue going on. They don't have sponsoring institution accreditation. So it gets back to different kinds of timing. Could they get sponsoring institution? Absolutely. They happen to have an individual, Dr. Ha, who is in charge of their clerkships for psychiatry, who blew me away. Amazing physician. Okay. But, you know, the timing isn't quite there.
What about Stanford?
Are they still on the phone? They were on the phone.
Dr. Adelsheim stepped away about 5 minutes ago. So he was on the phone most of the time.
Okay. Stanford, he was in a place of that he would be willing to bring something like sponsorship or that relationship to the chair of their department. He at this point was more interested in rotations, but that doesn't mean that he was absolutely open to additional conversations. Now, a lot of universities like to start with rotations first because it gives you a chance to get organizations and faculty and staff used to being a teaching environment.
Well, I'm not sure how that would work. We'd have to have a residency program in place to do rotations, either to Stanford or to here. And you need to have a sponsoring institution before I get there. In the application that's coming up for OSPIT, do we have to identify a sponsoring institution?
Christy, you've been more involved in that application than I have. I don't think you do, because it's for starting a new program. But you tell me, where are you at? What are your thoughts there?
That's actually Scott, and he stepped off the call about a minute ago.
You're right, it is Scott, huh?
Yeah. It's through Behavioral Health Butte County, but you know, we're waiting for this conversation to understand more about what your recommendations were. If I can, I have a question here from Dr. Liston, who had to start seeing patients. He wants to know if it would be feasible to trigger a psychiatry residency in Oroville Hospital without any rotations in Enloe, such that Enloe maintains its GME naivete when they proceed with starting primary care residencies later on. The idea being that they don't hamper Enloe's ability to maximize their cap, and it gives them time to establish their program, and then they can blend the two programs at that point.
Yes, that's possible. The only downside is you're not going to get the inpatient psych unit at Enloe.
Right.
Because it's not a sub provider of Enloe. It gets into all kinds of cost report terminology, but bottom line is you won't be able to use the Enloe inpatient psych unit. You'd only be able to use the PUF, which isn't necessarily a horrific thing. It's just one of the resources you've got in your community. And keep in mind, the numbers will change because different hospital, different revenue numbers. We base that off of Enloe's because but we'd have to go back and take a look at what Oroville's revenue is.
Is there anyone on this call that would like to have a follow-up conversation and just sort of bring some of the folks back in that had to leave, or is there another step for the sake of the process of the feasibility study? This is an end point, but curious what the next steps would be and should be.
Giovanni here. What it seems like, I mean, there's a series of next steps, and but one of the things it seems like we need to address or figure out is the capacity to collaborate, because that's going to be the thing that's going to get this across the finish line. Mm-hmm. I think I'd love to have a conversation with Kiki, a follow-up conversation. Just I understand that not all of it might be. We don't need to air out dirty laundry per se, but I think I think the intent is, what do we need to? Where are some of the barriers that we just need to address right away? Yeah. It's just going to take a lot of deep collaboration. And this type of collaboration, I mean, there's going to be some conversations that we're going to need to have on that. And I don't know if it's a task force or what you're thinking, Christy, as far as next steps and who tackles some of these things. But I think there's a series of conversations that need to happen.
I agree. You know, me saying everybody needs to hit the reset button, both in the region and external to the region. You know, it were so simple as me handing out those little red buttons that say reset. You know, it isn't. Mm-hmm. So Giovanni, I'm happy to have a call with you. I'm happy to drill down with that. As you know, I'm not going to say who said what, but I don't need to for us to have that conversation. The frustration for me right now is I really want to be in person with you guys and with the key players, because that's where the magic happens. Okay, it's harder via Zoom. You know, and in those conversations, that's where we can figure out, are they really going to be able to collaborate? What's it going to take?
And I think identifying some of those, it helps us identify who needs to be in the room. And then, so I wonder as well, with all the work that you've done and that, you know, and you kept on saying, particularly at the beginning, collaboration. And we need to make sure that, you know, we don't want to start this and exclude a couple of agencies that that should be at the table, and then that's part of the, you know,
that just makes things worse.
It makes it worse. So
Yeah.
it's, you know, trying to set the table with the right ones, and then having the right conversations up front, and then saying, okay, and trying to get a commitment towards it. So it seems like there's going to be a heavy lift here in the beginning, and I'm eager to know how we do that right from the beginning.
Yeah. So do you want to take that conversation offline, or do you want, I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah, sure, yes. And, absolutely. And then just to make sure that we, again, I think for the point of making sure the right people are at the table up front.
Yeah, agreed.
So Scott Nichols did say, thank you, Dr. Nichols, that he is interested in continuing conversations.
Great.
And I guess for me, it was hoping that Behavioral Health Butte County would have some more information and then be able to apply in 2 weeks' time for the OSHPD wet funds. And I don't know. I feel at this moment, maybe we're not ready to apply for those. And that just kind of makes me sad because.
Why? What do you think they need that they can't have from this?
I don't know. And Scott jumped off the call. So maybe a follow-up with him.
Yeah, because Christy, there's a lot of things I didn't show. Like I didn't show block rotation schedules, and I know he needs that. But I didn't show them because I don't want everybody getting in the weeds of going, well, why did you put, you know, Jerry Psych in block 13 of your whatever, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, we don't need to be in those discussions right now.
Exactly. So I'd be surprised if we don't have whatever he needs.
Okay. Thank you. You just made me feel better. So let me do a follow-up with him. And
yeah, you're not missing that dedeadline.
I don't want.
It's not. You're just not.
I just don't want to miss it. And it's not me. I'm not doing the application, so it's out of my hands.
Right.
Do we intend to put in an application? I hope so.
Yeah. The intent's there.
I'm not sure if this chance is ever going to come around again.
Right. You got to jump. You got to jump on it while it's there. And so, I mean, we're just missing Scott on the call right now. But
with regard to a sponsoring institution, there is that has a family practice program up in Shasta County, and there's a federally qualified health center up there that has a family practice residency program. Is it possible one of those could be a sponsoring institution?
Absolutely. And I did talk with Dean Germano and Debbie Lupica because they've been longtime friends, and I helped start that program. And are they interested in psych? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be an academic institution.
So we might be able to work out something there having to do with agreement for rotation.
Yes, but you just got to be careful because whoever is the sponsor has control. So you could use Ukiah. You could use Ukiah as an example. You could do one with them, and I could make some. There's some things I can't speak to right now, and there are things I can speak to that would say I would definitely consider Ukiah. But then Adventist Health has control of this residency. So you just have to be comfortable with whoever you're going to partner with, because this is a marriage.
Oh God.
But the alternative is to do it all by ourselves.
Right.
Which is problematic too.
Yep.
I have a question about what qualifies for rural.
Oh boy.
Is it in hospital or any part of it? I had noticed that in my neighborhood here, which happens to be one of the more expensive neighborhoods in the country. Actually, not my neighborhood, but right next to it, there's a little sliver that's rural designated. That this little point that comes down across the east part of the Nevada and through California and right down into Cal Park. And so like if
Interesting.
we put an office there, does that make us a rural health facility?
It depends on what type of grant you are applying for. So Medicare uses a different definition than HRSA with its Federal Office of Rural Health Policy. And then there's also the definitions for rural health clinics. So I'd like to say this is the definition, but there are multiple definitions of rural, and different funders use different definitions. Now, if you put an office, the corporate office, in that little sliver, would that be a benefit? Probably. But it wouldn't change anything with a medical center or a university starting a rural training track, because that uses the Medicare definition, which is pretty much county-based. It is county-based.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, thoughts? Yay, let's do this.
We need it.
Yay, let's do this.
All right.
All right, so we're going to have to do a series of follow-up conversations. All right.
And Christy, let's do a call with Scott. I've got a pretty calm week this week. Giovanni, let's do a follow-up call. But let's make sure he has whatever he needs for the wet grant.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't get a chance to ask him that.
Yeah, I got it.
And the health, I love that you threw Healthy Rural California in there. And I think if there were to be did you dismiss, is that one of the points that got dismissed?
No, it didn't get dismissed.
Okay. I just have to say, it feels so overwhelming just that it just launched, you know, but I agree. It's a ground neutral organization that is a mission to improve public health. So it's just kind of scary for me as the only staff person that like, what? Anyway, I just have to say that it's my own, you know, I like to do things well and right. And it just feels like it would need like 5 more people to do things right. But maybe that's
Well, it would need more people, and it would need you again. You're going into that lease or buy situation, but also remember what kind of bottom line numbers you're looking at in that program. I just don't want to see you have a program where the first 2 years are sitting in an academic institution. You're not getting revenue.
Yeah.
And that becomes a non-starter to me.
And I have to say, for the 1.5 years that I've been in this position, my input, my 100% of my instinct is that we should have the control. I just see too many opportunities where the control goes elsewhere, and ultimately that doesn't help the area that we're trying to help. And so anyway, that's my gut instinct. I'm not.
Well, and I've got my biases. I do, and you mentioned Shasta, so I'll share the story that Dean Germana of Shasta Community Health tells all the time. Their FQHC was a ambulatory site for a track for the family medicine program that existed at the hospital across the street. And one day, for a variety of reasons having nothing to do with Shasta Community Health or relationship or the quality of the teaching, the hospital decided to eliminate that track and pull the residents back into the hospital and the hospital clinic, leaving Shasta Community Health with no residents overnight. Okay. That a number of years went by, and when the Teaching Health Center funding became available, that's when Dean called me and said, we must have it. We must get it. And we're only willing to do it if we are in control, because we're not going to let that happen to us again. And anytime Dean and I are doing a presentation together, he tells that story. I mean, it left, and mind you, with the program that they set up, it's completely dependent for all inpatient on that same hospital. So there's both a really good relationship, but also some old history, which is, you know, forewarned is forearmed, that Dean will share. So it's why I like to keep things, you know, I like to keep things local if possible. And there's no denying that you've got infrastructure challenges. You can't build something amazing on a cracked foundation, on a weak foundation. So turn to Davis and have them be your office of GME. Turn to Enloe, and as Enloe is building their office of GME and they're looking at this. I know there's a number of different scenarios. Turn to Shasta Community Health. A number of options to look at. You can lease that function out.
All right, so Dr. Pappas would also like to be included in the calls. Thank you, Dr.
Yay.
for mentioning that, yeah.
Yay. You were that amazing pediatric psychiatrist we mentioned, in case you didn't know.
In Oroville, yeah. The last, I do want to mention, I still have sponsorship funding from California Health and Wellness for the Northern California Medical Education Program. And my first step that I wanted to take with that new program was to video record like Dr. Pappas and her enthusiasm and energy around a psychiatry program, which would then help us, you know, recruit the residents in the future. It would help the other academic, universities to see what a great, vibrant community there is that they would be partnering with. And for me, my original thoughts was it was pre-pandemic, and I thought, well, let's just get the word out there how great we are, right? Now I'm actually thinking about the videos as kind of essential because there is less opportunity for folks to do site visits and be here in person in the next 6 months to a year, possibly long, hopefully not that long. But anyway, so I've got to get back into that project as well and make those videos happen because there's just no other way to sort of get the connections made. And I experienced that when I was working with Kiki in June, and some of these partnering institutions just, they're not familiar with who we are, and it's kind of like a relationship. If you want to talk about marriage, it's like dating, right? You want to get to know the people that you're going to be in this long-term relationship with. So the video dating, there we go. That's what it is. Anyway, I do need to commit myself to that in the next few months.
We just don't want them to be able to swipe to anybody else, but you guys, right?
So it'd be like Dr. Nichols, you may not be familiar that we got sponsorship funds for that project, and it'd be great to interview you on video and have you talk about what your vision would be, those kind of things, to really get the word out, and as we start these relationships, wherever they go. So.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, and not to single out any one person, but you look at the type of practice that Dr. Nichols has. What an amazing opportunity for residents. And it's just, what an amazing opportunity. So you guys really have some great resources. It's just about deciding your go and deciding what model you want to go after. And that's you're right, Christy. It's additional conversations.
So do we have a timeline for next steps? I mean, do you see the psychiatric task force is moving forward with this, or what do you think we're going to do next?
Oh, the regional mental health task force is going to be bigger, and I think we're at the point of narrowing down now to a small working groups. But that's a really good question, Kim. I'm not sure Kiki knows about, or Maggie knows about, the Healthy Rural California, thanks to North Valley Community Foundation, received a grant to launch the regional mental health task force, and I have to do. I'm working on it. I just was trying to get a Survey Monkey together as a registration form so that I could get a better understanding of how people want to be involved with that task force. And then I'm really looking at the fall for the big summit and how are we going to bring people together in this environment. So online options are what I'm really looking into. So the Regional Mental Health Task Force really came about because of the Psychiatry Residency Program and the discussions, and North Valley Community Foundation's commitment to, just the healthy initiative was what it was called, and now it's Butte Thrives. So working in tandem with the two groups to take what we know from evaluations and assessments are the needs of the community and really the region, because we don't want to be just county by county. We tend to get better funding and better solutions as a regional approach. So I'm not really explaining this all that well, but it will be a way to transition from, we know we need these solutions, to actually making those solutions come to fruition in a year's time. So kind of parallel to how the psychiatry residency program has been progressing. We had a task force. We started talking about the needs of the psychiatry residency program, and then getting to where we are today, but going beyond just like residency programs with the Regional Mental Health Task Force. However, if I could see that if some of these conversations don't have traction, or somehow we end up applying for the OSHPD wet funds and we don't get them, or as the months progress and COVID-19 continues to upend everything in our lives, I could see that the Regional Mental Health Task Force would be a mechanism to keep this going forward with the Residency Task Force, and sort of bringing those together. But hopefully we won't have that happen. All right. Well, Kiki, thank you so much for your just incredible work. I know it took a lot of time, and Maggie too, but you kept this moving forward, and it's really refreshing to see that there's so much opportunity.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's exciting.
Any more questions from anybody?
Well, I've got one question.
Oh.
Is there any reason not to do this? Okay.
Not to do this, meaning
A psychiatry residency program in whatever form.
I can't think of any, but my question along this line, to what extent is the OSHPD funding necessary?
You need the
Is it
planning dollars.
possible if we go ahead with this without any kind of exterior funding, grant funding?
Because here's the deal. Hospitals are tapped out right now. The Butte County Behavioral Health is looking at a major deficit, as you know, because of COVID. So the normal model where we would use of, okay, everybody reach into your checkbooks won't work right now due to COVID. So we've got to look at the wet funding and the innovation grants to fund the startup. And it seems imminently doable. I mean, the wet application was not that difficult. Christy and I went through it. It's not that hard. Yeah. And the innovation funding, folks are really excited about. So
So you think it's possible to go ahead even if we don't apply for OSHPD or if we get turned down?
If you get turned down by OSHPD, you're going to need to figure out how you're getting that funding to do the planning. And right now people are tapped out. People have said to me, we're not able to put dollars in. So it would be difficult to go forward unless you get the WET funding and the innovation grant funding.
It is one of the, well, I have to say in March, the end of March, I just had so much steam taken out of me because I just could see COVID-19 was going to strain everyone. And I just felt like there was no hope. But what Kiki for me has done is brought that hope. I've said, you know what, there are ways to do this. And then in the midst of all these conversations, hearing that OSHPD was actually going to give funding for psychiatry residency programs, it just, there seemed to be enough signals coming along that just kept giving hope. Every time it turned into like, well, gee, I don't know if this is going to work, or, you know, behavioral health, Butte County had the grant money, but then they totally used that for COVID-19, very understandable, but it was also sort of like, no, we just had that funding, now it's gone. Then OSHPD came up. So it's almost as if the signs are there, we just need to make it happen.
Yep, agreed.
And it just takes time. So.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work on this. Really appreciate it.
It was our pleasure. Thank you for all of you for your input and your time with us. It was really helpful. Kim, your interview with us is one that I will remember a long time. So thank you.
Good.
All right.
Okay.
You done with us?
Nice seeing you all.
All right.
Okay.
Christy, you're going to kick us out?
Yeah, it looked like Dr. Raitt had a question.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure if I can unmute him. Okay, he seems to be talking, but I can't hear. We can't hear you, Dr. Raitt. Anyway, all right. I guess we're done then.
Great.
All right. All right, thanks everybody. So next steps, I got them jotted down and we'll be in touch by email.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Kiki.
Oh, he's still trying to talk?
Is he?
It's okay. I can't even figure out how to. Ah, there we go. Stop the share and leave.
All right, bye. I'm gonna end.